Hello there. Here we are, one more property, the distributive property. This is actually my favorite one on this lesson on algebra. I love the distributive property. The distributive property is what we're going to talk about, but let's take just a second to review. First of all, we had the commutative property. Commutative, and that was going back and forth. Remember that one? For instance, make sure that looks like an O. For instance, back and forth, we did numbers like 3 plus 5 is the same as 5 plus 3. You get 8 either time. That's the commutative property. We called it back and forth. Then we did the associative property. The associative property is a little bit different. It had to do with like your friend groups or your grouping or parentheses. Let's undo that. I don't need a B, I need a G. Grouping. The way things are grouped together. A lot of times there's three numbers, 3 plus 4 plus 5. I think we used maybe this exact one, equals 3 plus 4 plus 5. And we used grouping symbols or parentheses in different places. And we remember that doesn't matter how you group it. The answer is the same whether you start with 4 plus 5 or you start with 3 plus 4. You end up getting the same answer. And then we did the identity. Switch colors again. Identity. And the identity property was like the really easy one. It's who am I? I guess that's kind of, we didn't explain it that way, but who am I? In math, our properties of identity are for addition and for multiplication. All of these are for addition and for multiplication. The identity property, how do you get 3 to equal 3 in addition? Well, you add 0. 3 plus 0 equals 3. That's the identity. Who am I? I'm 3. And in multiplication, you do it by multiplying by what? Yes, by 1. You knew it. 3 times 1 is 1. 3 times 1 is 3. That's what we're trying to do. 3 times 1 is 3. So the identity for addition is 0, the identity property, and the identity property for multiplication is 1. Those are the important numbers. They're the ones that make the number stay the same. It means it doesn't change anything. Alright, so on to the distributive property. This one has to do with how things are distributed, how things are carried out, how you want to arrange them. So it's the way we arrange our math problems, and usually it's sort of a combination of addition and multiplication, or subtraction and multiplication. And a lot of times it looks like this: 5 times, now we have a parenthesis, but this is not the associative property, 7 plus 9. 5 times 7 plus 9. Now, a lot of times what we do in math is we do what's in the parentheses first. So I would figure out what 7 plus 9 is, and then I would take 5 and I would multiply 5 times 16. In my head I'd go 10 times 16, which is 160, and then I would split that in half, so I'd get 80. And that's what 5 times 16 is. You could always write it out the long way. Like this, you get the same thing. 6, 7, 8. You get 80. So that's how it works. But the distributive shows you another way to do it, and it's really cool. And it comes in. This is why we call this lesson an algebra lesson, because it comes in even more in algebra. It's something that you're going to see all the time when you get to algebra. All right. So what we do is we change it around. 5 times 7 plus 9. This is how it works. You have 5 is times this whole thing. It's multiplied by 7 and 9. So we're going to just, 5 times 7 plus 5 times 9. And we've kind of grouped 5 and 7 together, 5 and 9 together. It really is 5 times this whole thing. So it's 5 times 7 and it's 5 times 9. And a lot of times in algebra class, I end up drawing little arrows like this: 5 times 7 and 5 times 9. And then I draw it out like this: 5 times 7 plus 5 times 9, and then I go ahead and do the work. 5 times 7 is 35, plus 5 times 9 is 45, and 35 plus 45. Carry the 1 equals 80. We knew it was going to be 80 because we already did the problem over here. This way it shows that it's 80 and it's using a different method, the distributive property. Some of you might think this is harder, but there are actually times when this is way better, way cooler, and way more useful, and you'll find that more as we go on. It's something you have to know how to do. Let's try a couple others. You know what? I told you it could be done with subtraction, so let's just make up a problem and have it be a subtraction problem. Alright, so 5 times 7 minus 2. Now you could say 7 minus 2 is 5. 5 times 5 is 25. We know that the answer is going to be 25 now. We just found out. But how do we do it using the distributive property? 5, let's write a little arrow here, 5 times 7. You don't have to use the grouping symbols, but I thought maybe it would make it clearer to you. 5 times 2. Now you might notice that I just made a little mistake. We're going to leave that in here. I want you to know that teachers make mistakes too. It's not addition here. It's not. We're going to erase that addition sign, and we're going to put in a subtraction sign. See, it's 7 take away 2, 7 minus 2, so it's 5 times 7 minus 5 times 2. This is why I wanted to show you a subtraction problem, to show you how it works differently. So 5 times 7 is 35, and 5 times 2 is 10. 35 minus 10 is equal to 25. And we get the same answer as we got the other way. Again, this doesn't necessarily look easier, but it gets easier when you try more complicated problems, or you find, especially in algebra, when you're adding x's and y's, that it's easier. Let's try one more real quick and see what happens. What happens if you have a number that's just weird, like 3 times 64? You might think to yourself, how can I use the distributive property to do this question? And I'm going to show you. Here we go. Changing this into the distributive property is like changing 64 into an addition problem. 64 is the same as 60 plus 4. And this comes in really handy. Remember we talked about place value. We have 60, 6 tens, or 60 and 4 ones, which is 4. And now we have a distributive property. Remember what we do maybe with the arrows: 3 times 60 and 3 times 4. 3 times 60 plus 3 times 4. 3 times 60, 3 times 6 is 18. Add a 0, so 3 times 60 is 180, plus 3 times 4 is 12. So 180 plus 12 is 192. Voila, you just figured out a neat way to solve this problem. The only way to solve it over here is with a calculator, or with the way that you learned back in 3rd grade. 64 times 3, 3 times 4 is 12, 3 times 6 is 18. Remember I carried the 1, 18 plus 1 is 19, 192. Voila, I got the same answer. And though some of you might be really good at this answer, and this method might seem like the only way to go, this method is pretty neat. It's one of my favorites. And for this lesson at least, you have to practice doing it this way. You got to pull it apart, use the distributive property, redistribute the numbers, follow this pattern, and get your answer. Okay? Nice job. Nice job. Way to go. Really big smiley face, because I love the distributive property.